Why religious sects destroy the ability to think. Religious sects, or high-control groups, often called cults, do not simply offer faith, they systematically destroy critical thinking, personal autonomy, and the ability to make independent decisions. This is not accidental. It happens through a carefully designed system of control that begins in early childhood. The main mechanisms are indoctrination, or instilling doctrines as absolute truth, and rigid programming of gender roles. As a result, a person grows up not as a free individual, but as a tool of the sect. I will break this down point by point, drawing on psychological research, Stephen Hassan's BITE model, behavior, information, thought, emotion control, and real-life consequences. This is not anti-religious propaganda, but an objective examination of mechanisms confirmed by data from psychology, sociology, and testimonies of former members. 1. Indoctrination from the earliest childhood, why a child cannot choose for themselves. Sects begin working with children from birth or very early age, when the brain is most plastic. From the first years of life, a child is taught, our faith is the only absolute truth. Everything else is a lie, sin, or satanic deception. This is not education, it is cognitive programming. Mechanism of suppressing critical thinking. Children are not exposed to alternative viewpoints. Their school, often run internally by the sect, teaches only the group's doctrines. Questions like, why is this true, are punished as lack of faith or influence of the devil. Research shows that such suppression of cognitive, emotional, and creative processes disrupts the development of independent thinking. Children learn not to analyze, but to repeat and obey. Lack of choice. A child cannot choose their faith. It is imposed on them like air. Any doubt triggers fear, fear of hell, expulsion, or loss of family. This creates learned helplessness and cognitive dissonance. The brain learns to ignore contradictions to avoid pain. As a result, as an adult, the person is often unable to objectively evaluate information. Any external source is perceived as an attack on the faith. Long-term consequences. Former sect members frequently describe a mental fog, difficulty making decisions, analyzing facts, or trusting their own judgment. Many spend years in therapy simply learning how to think independently again. This is not raising children in faith, it is the theft of childhood and the future of their mind. 2. Rigid gender roles. How sects program girls and boys. Sects amplify traditional patriarchal stereotypes, taking them to extremes. This is not merely culture, it is a tool for controlling people's bodies, time, and futures. For girls and women. From childhood, they are taught that their main and often only value is to become a wife and mother. Education, career, and personal interests are labeled as selfishness or worldly influence. Critical analysis. This severely limits autonomy. A woman cannot freely choose her own life path. Any choice outside marriage and children triggers guilt and fear. Studies show that women in such groups suffer more frequently from depression, loss of identity, and difficulty setting personal boundaries. Real problems: early marriages, sometimes involving minors, having many children without regard for health, and prohibition of contraception. Women become producers of new sect members. For boys and men, the main purpose in life is to be a provider, father of many children, and defender of the faith. Personal desires, hobbies, and rest are considered secondary. Critical analysis. Men fall into the trap of toxic responsibility. They are not allowed to show weakness, doubt, or change priorities. This leads to burnout, chronic stress, and the inability to develop as individuals. The sect exploits them as resource providers, money, time, and labor. Overall effect: gender roles become a cage. They kill individuality, make people mutually dependent within the system, and prevent them from critically evaluating whether the system itself is fair. 3. All major problems of religious sects, a complete breakdown. Sects use Stephen Hassan's BITE model, which describes 4 levels of total control. The more points that apply, the more dangerous the group. Behavior control. Strict rules about what to wear, who to associate with, how much to work, when to sleep, and how to have sex. Violations are punished with shunning or public humiliation. A person loses control of their own life. Information control. Prohibition of outside sources, the internet, books, or former members. Critics are labeled as enemies. Members live in an information bubble and cannot verify the group's doctrines. Thought control. Use of special loaded language like ours, worldly, or demonic. Doubts are forbidden. Members learn to censor themselves. This is not my thought, it is a temptation. Emotion control. Love bombing upon entry, combined with fear, guilt, and phobias upon exit. If you leave, you will lose your family and go to hell. Emotions are used as powerful levers. Other systemic problems. Isolation. Members are cut off from family, friends, and society. The outside world is portrayed as dangerous. Financial exploitation, donations, sometimes 10 to 30% of income, unpaid labor, and pressure to sell personal property. Abuse. Physical, sexual, and psychological abuse, well documented in groups like FLDS, Children of God, Nixium, and others. Leaders often declare themselves prophets, and their desires become God's will. Rejection of medicine. Belief in faith healing leads to preventable deaths of both children and adults. Shunning or disfellowshipping. Former members are completely cut off from their families, one of the cruelest control mechanisms. Psychological consequences. PTSD, depression, anxiety disorders, trust issues, and difficulties with intimacy. Children raised in sects often function at a lower mental age than their actual age and must relearn how to live in the real world. 4. Why this is literally killing the ability to think. Critical thinking requires access to diverse sources of information, the skill to ask questions, and emotional safety to experience doubt. Sects remove all of these. A person is turned into a carrier of dogma rather than an independent individual. This is not spirituality, it is cognitive enslavement. In the long term, such people are less adaptable to a changing world, more vulnerable to manipulation, including political, and less likely to achieve personal happiness. If you or your loved ones have been affected by this, recovery is possible. There are specialists in exit counseling, trauma therapy, and support communities for former members. Freedom of thought is a right that can be reclaimed.